Nobody is coming to save you. The sooner you accept that, the sooner your real life begins. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for the right person, the right moment, the right conditions. They wait for someone to notice their potential, hand them an opportunity, or fix what is broken in their life. And while they wait, time keeps moving. The pain of staying stuck becomes heavier every single year. The life you want is built by your own hands, or it is never built at all. In this video, you will discover 10 powerful principles that will shift how you think, how you act, and how you see yourself. These are not theories. These are real, honest truths that will challenge you and change you. If you are ready to stop waiting and start building the life that actually belongs to you, then watch this entire video right now. Number 1, stop waiting for someone to save you today. Let me tell you something that most people never want to hear. The person you are waiting for is never coming. You have been standing at that door your entire life, hoping someone will knock and hand you the answers. You've been looking left and right, waiting for a mentor, a friend, a family member, or even a stranger to step in and fix what is broken in your life. And while you wait, the days keep moving. The weeks turn into months. The months turn into years, and you are still standing in the same place, wondering why nothing has changed. Here's the truth that changed my life and the lives of thousands of people I have spoken to over the years. Nobody is coming. That is not me being harsh. That is me being honest with you, because I respect you too much to tell you a comfortable lie. The people around you have their own problems, their own fears, their own unpaid bills, their own broken relationships, and their own sleepless nights. They are busy surviving their own life. They do not have the time or the energy to come and rescue you from yours. And deep down, if you are really honest with yourself, you already know this. Think about the last time you waited for someone to help you move forward. Maybe you waited for your boss to recognize your hard work before you gave your best effort. Maybe you waited for your partner to motivate you before you started taking care of yourself. Maybe you waited for your finances to magically improve before you took a single step toward learning something new. Waiting feels safe. It feels comfortable. It gives you someone to blame when things do not work out. If nobody helped you, then the failure is not your fault. That is how the human mind protects itself. But that protection is also a prison. Psychology tells us something very important about human behavior. When people feel helpless over a long period of time, they begin to believe that they have no control over their outcomes. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. It was first studied in the 1960s, and the findings were clear. When people experience repeated situations where their actions seem to make no difference, they stop trying, they stop acting, they accept their condition as permanent. And that acceptance slowly becomes their identity. They no longer see themselves as someone who can change their situation. They see themselves as someone who is simply dealt a bad hand. This is not weakness. This is a pattern. And patterns can be broken. The moment you stop waiting is the moment your real life begins. I have met people who had nothing. No money, no connections, no education in the traditional sense. No one standing behind them with encouragement. And yet they built something real. They built businesses. They built health. They built confidence. They built families full of love and stability. What did they have that others did not? They made a decision one morning. Maybe not a dramatic decision, maybe not a loud declaration, but a quiet and firm decision that said, I will handle this myself. That one decision rewired everything. Now I want you to think about your own life right now. Not yesterday, not last year, right now. Is there something you have been putting off because you are waiting for the right support, the right timing, the right person, or the right sign? Is there a goal sitting in the corner of your mind that you keep pushing back because conditions are not perfect yet? Conditions will never be perfect. The right support may never come. The right timing is a myth that keeps people comfortable and stuck at the same time. The only real timing that exists is the one you create yourself, and it starts the moment you decide to move. Here is something I want you to really sit with. Waiting for someone to save you does something deeply damaging over time. It shifts your identity from a person who acts to a person who reacts. When you are always waiting for external help, you begin to measure your progress by how much other people do for you. Your confidence shrinks. Your belief in yourself fades. You start to feel like the world owes you something. And when the world does not deliver, you feel angry, bitter, and disappointed. That cycle does not just slow you down. It quietly destroys the best parts of who you are. I worked with a man years ago who had been waiting for his circumstances to change for nearly a decade. He kept telling me the same story. He said his environment was the problem. He said the people around him were holding him back. He said if only someone had given him a real opportunity, things would be different. And I listened carefully. Then I asked him one question. I said, "What have you done this week, just this week, without anyone's help to move your life 1 inch forward?" He went quiet, and in that silence, he realized something painful. He had done nothing, not because he was lazy, not because he was stupid, but because he had been so focused on what others were not doing for him that he completely forgot about what he could do for himself. That moment of silence is something I have seen in hundreds of conversations. It is the moment a person stops making excuses and starts making contact with reality. Reality is not always kind, but it is always kind. And when you face reality, honestly, something powerful happens inside you. You stop feeling like a victim of your circumstances, and you start feeling like a creator of your future. That shift in feeling is not small. That shift is everything. It changes the way you walk into a room. It changes the way you speak to people. It changes the way you approach a problem. You carry yourself differently when you stop waiting and start working. Let me give you something practical to take away from this. Every morning, before you check your phone, before you look for validation, before you wait for someone to tell you what to do, ask yourself one question. Ask yourself, what is one thing I can do today, completely on my own, that moves me closer to where I want to be? Just one thing. It does not need to be massive. It does not need to impress anyone. It just needs to be yours. Owned by you, executed by you. That one act every single day builds something inside you that no one can take away. It builds trust in yourself. And self-trust is the most powerful currency a human being can possess. People spend so much time trying to build trust with others. They try to impress, to perform, to prove themselves to the world. But they neglect the most important relationship of all, which is the relationship with themselves. When you stop waiting and start doing mine, that message says, I am capable. I am serious. I am someone who follows through. And your mind starts to believe it. Your behavior starts to reflect it. Your results start to confirm it. This is not positive thinking. This is behavioral science working in your favor. The hardest part of stopping the wait is not the action itself. The hardest part is accepting that you are responsible. Full responsibility feels heavy at first. It feels unfair sometimes, especially when life has genuinely been difficult. But responsibility is not about blame. Responsibility is about power. When you take responsibility for your life, you take back the power to change it. As long as you believe someone else is responsible for your situation, you are giving that person the power over your future. And that is a terrible trade to make. You have to understand something about the way life works. Life does not reward waiting. Life rewards movement. Life rewards the person who shows up, who figures it out, who tries even when it is uncomfortable. The people you admire, the people who have built something meaningful, they were not always ready. They were not always confident. They did not always have support, but they moved anyway. They acted anyway. They decided that waiting was more dangerous than trying. And that decision made all the difference in their story. So today, right now, in this moment, make a choice. Decide that you will no longer put your life on hold while you wait for someone to rescue you. Decide that your dreams are worth more than the comfort of waiting. Decide that you are someone who figures it out, who gets up, who keeps moving, even when the road is unclear. You do not need permission. You do not need perfect conditions. You do not need someone to believe in you before you start believing in yourself. The only thing you need is a decision. One real, honest, firm decision that says today is the day I stop waiting and start building the life I actually want to live. Number 2, build the habit of solving your own problems. Most people treat their problems like uninvited guests. They hope the problem will get tired and leave on its own. They ignore it, delay it, complain about it to everyone around them, and then wake up the next morning, surprised that it is still sitting right there, waiting. This is one of the most common and costly mistakes a person can make in their lifetime. Problems do not dissolve on their own. They grow when you avoid them. They get heavier when you leave them unattended, and the longer you wait to face them, the more power they take from you. The person who learns to solve problems consistently and independently becomes a completely different kind of human being over time. I want to start by making something very clear. Solving your own problems is not about pride. It is not about refusing help when help is genuinely available and appropriate. It is about building a muscle inside yourself that gets stronger every single time you use it. When you go to the gym and lift weights, your muscles break down slightly and then rebuild stronger than before. Problem solving works in exactly the same way. Every time you sit down with a problem and work through it using your own thinking, your own research, your own effort, you become more capable than you were before that problem arrived. The problem was not your enemy. The problem was your teacher wearing uncomfortable clothes. Here is something that most motivational content will never tell you. The habit of solving your own problems is built in small moments, not big dramatic ones. People imagine that problem solving is reserved for major life crises. They think it only matters when the stakes are high and the pressure is extreme. But the real training happens in the small daily friction of life. When your internet stops working, do you immediately call someone, or do you first try to figure it out yourself? When a task at work feels confusing, do you rush to ask a colleague? Or do you spend 10 focused minutes reading and thinking before reaching out? These small choices accumulate. They train your brain to default toward solution rather than toward dependence. Neuroscience gives us a powerful insight here. The human brain is a prediction machine. It constantly looks for patterns and stores shortcuts based on repeated experiences. When you consistently respond to problems by seeking external help first, your brain registers that pattern and begins to default to it automatically. You stop even trying to solve things independently because your brain has learned that looking outward is the faster path. Over time, this rewires your confidence. You start feeling genuinely unable to handle things alone, not because you lack the ability, but because you have trained your brain to skip the step where you try. Reversing this pattern takes intentional effort, but it is absolutely possible, and the results are life-changing. Let me share something I have observed in people who are truly competent and deeply self-reliant. They do not panic when a problem appears. There is a certain calm that settles in them, not because they are fearless, but because they have a track record of working through hard things. They have proven to themselves so many times that problems are solvable, that the arrival of a new problem does not shake them the way it shakes someone who has always outsourced their solutions. That calm is earned. It is built through repetition. It is the result of choosing over and over again to sit with the problem and think before running away from it. Now, I want to talk about something that people rarely discuss when it comes to self-reliance. There is an emotional cost to always needing someone else to fix your problems. Every time you hand your problem to someone else, you quietly send a message to your own subconscious. That message says you're not capable of handling this. And your subconscious believes every message you send it. After years of outsourcing your solutions, you wake up one day feeling genuinely powerless. Not because life is unfair, but because you have spent years training yourself to feel inadequate. The emotional weight of that is real. It shows up as anxiety. It shows up as low confidence. It shows up as the constant feeling that you are one problem away from falling apart. The antidote to that feeling is not therapy, not motivation, not someone cheering you on. The antidote is evidence. You need evidence that you can handle things. And the only way to collect that evidence is to actually handle things. Start small. Pick the smallest problem sitting in your life right now and commit to solving it yourself before asking anyone for input. Maybe it is a bill you have been avoiding. Maybe it is a difficult conversation you keep postponing. Maybe it is a skill you need to learn but have been hoping someone would just teach you. Whatever it is, sit with it. Think about it. Research it. Write down what you know and what you do not know. And then take one action in the direction of a solution. That one action changes the emotional landscape inside you more than any motivational speech ever could. There is a method I believe in deeply when it comes to developing the problem-solving habit. I call it the three-step approach, and it is as simple as it sounds. First, define the problem clearly. Most people fail at this step. They describe their problem in vague emotional terms. They say things like everything is falling apart or nothing is working. That is not a problem definition. That is a feeling. A real problem definition is specific. It says I do not have enough income to cover my monthly expenses by $400. That specificity changes everything, because now you have something concrete to work with. Second, list every possible action you could take on your own. No matter how small or imperfect, do not edit the list yet. Just write. Third, pick the most realistic action and do it today, not tomorrow, today. This process builds the habit by giving your brain a reliable structure to follow every single time a problem appears. Here is my opinion on something that very few people say out loud. The culture of constantly asking for help before trying has made entire generations of people weaker than they should be. I am not saying community is bad. I am not saying asking for help is wrong. What I am saying is that asking for help has become the first step instead of the last resort for millions of people. And that shift has produced a generation that feels overwhelmed by normal life challenges. Normal life is full of problems. A person who cannot solve problems independently will spend their entire life feeling overwhelmed by things that are actually manageable. Building the habit of solving your own problems is not optional if you want to live with dignity and direction. Think about the people in your life who you genuinely respect and admire. Not the ones who talk the loudest or look the most impressive on the surface. The ones you actually respect when you are honest with yourself. Chances are, those people handle their own business. They figure things out. They do not broadcast every problem they face. They get quiet, they think, they act, and they come out the other side having grown through the experience. That quality is not something they were born with. It was built through years of choosing to engage with difficulty instead of running from it. You can build that same quality starting right now. Every problem you solve on your own deposits something into your internal account of self-belief. Every time you figure something out, your brain updates its understanding of what you are capable of. That updated understanding changes your baseline. What felt overwhelming 6 months ago starts to feel manageable. What felt impossible a year ago starts to feel like a normal challenge. Your whole experience of life shifts when you consistently prove to yourself that you are someone who solves problems. The world does not feel as threatening. Other people's opinions feel less controlling. You walk through your days with a quiet confidence that does not need to announce itself because it is rooted in real experience. Start today with one commitment. The next problem that arrives in your life before you pick up the phone, before you text a friend, before you post in a group asking for answers. Spend 30 minutes with it yourself. Just 30 minutes. Think about it seriously. Write down what you know. Search for information. Try one thing. You might not solve it perfectly. You might not solve it at all in that 30 minutes, but you will have practiced the habit. And habits, when practiced consistently, become the foundation of who you are as a person. The person who builds the habit of solving their own problems becomes someone the world cannot easily defeat. Number 3, take full ownership of every decision you make. There is a conversation that happens in the minds of millions of people every single day, and almost nobody talks about it openly. It is the conversation where a person looks at their life and quietly asks how they ended up here. They look at their job and wonder how it became so unfulfilling. They look at their relationships and wonder how things got so complicated. They look at their bank account and feel a heaviness in their chest that they cannot quite explain. And then, almost automatically, their mind starts pointing outward. It was the economy. It was their parents. It was the bad advice they received. It was the person who let them down at the worst possible time. The finger always points somewhere else. And that is exactly why nothing changes. Ownership is the single most uncomfortable and the single most powerful concept a human being can apply to their life. When I say ownership, I mean something very specific. I mean the complete acceptance that your life right now, in this moment, is the direct result of the decisions you have made up until this point. Not entirely the decisions of others, not the result of luck alone, not the consequence of a system that worked against you. Your choices, your responses to the things that happen to you. This is a hard truth to accept. It stings. It can even feel unjust when life has genuinely dealt you difficult circumstances. But ownership is not about deciding who is to blame. Ownership is about deciding who is responsible for the next chapter. Let me draw a clear distinction that most people confuse. Blame and responsibility are two entirely different things. Blame looks backward. It identifies who caused the problem and holds them accountable for the pain you are feeling right now. Responsibility looks forward. It asks what you are going to do about your situation, regardless of who created it. A person consumed by blame gives their emotional energy to the past. A person who takes responsibility directs their energy toward the future. Both of these people may have experienced the same hardship. Both may have every right to feel hurt. But only one of them is building something while the other is standing still, rehearsing a story that keeps them trapped. Psychology has documented something called the locus of control, and it is one of the most revealing concepts in behavioral science. People with an external locus of control believe that outside forces, other people, luck, fate, and circumstances are the primary drivers of what happens in their life. People with an internal locus of control believe that their own choices and actions are the primary drivers. Studies conducted across decades and across different cultures consistently show that people with an internal locus of control are more successful, more resilient, healthier, and report higher levels of life satisfaction. This is not a small difference in mindset. This is a fundamental difference in how a person moves through the world, and it shapes almost every outcome they produce. Here is what I find most fascinating about this research. People are not born with a fixed locus of control. It develops through experience, through environment, and most importantly, through the habits of thinking that a person practices over time. This means that if you've spent years operating with an external locus of control, if you have spent years believing that things just happen to you rather than through you can change that. It requires conscious effort. It requires conscious yourself. Every time you reach for an excuse and redirecting that energy toward a question. The question is simple. What could I have done differently? And what will I do differently from this point forward? I want to share something personal here because I think it adds weight to this conversation. Early in my working life, I made a series of financial decisions that left me in a very difficult position. And my first instinct was exactly what most people do. I started mentally listing every external factor that contributed to where I ended up. The market was unpredictable. The advice I received was poor. The timing was wrong. And all of those things were partially true. But they were also completely useless to me as explanations, because none of them could move me forward. The moment I stopped explaining my situation and started owning it, the moment I said, this is where I am, and it is mine to fix, everything shifted, not instantly, not painlessly, but the direction changed because taking ownership of your decisions does not mean punishing yourself for past mistakes. This is a critical point that people often misunderstand. Ownership without self-compassion turns into shame. And shame is not a motivator. Shame is a paralysis agent. It makes you smaller. It makes you less willing to try again, because trying again means risking another failure and another round of self-punishment. Real ownership is clear-eyed and forward-moving. It says, I made that choice. I understand why I made it. I see what it cost me, and I am now choosing differently. There is no drama in that process. There is no excessive guilt. There is just honest accounting and a clear commitment to the next decision. Every decision you make is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. This is not just a motivational idea. This is behavioral reality. Your identity is not fixed. It is constructed through the accumulation of your choices. Every time you choose to take responsibility, your brain registers that as evidence that you are a responsible person. Every time you choose to deflect and blame, your brain registers that too. Over thousands of small decisions, your brain builds a self-image. That self-image then influences how you approach future decisions before you even consciously think about them. The habit of ownership quite literally rewires who you believe yourself to be at the deepest level. Let me give you a practical framework for applying this in real time. When something goes wrong in your life, and things will go wrong because that is the nature of being alive, run through 3 honest questions before you say or do anything else. Question 1. What role did my choices play in producing this outcome? Not the only role, just your role. Be specific and be fair to yourself. Question 2. What information did I have at the time and how did I use it? This question protects you from being too hard on yourself while still keeping you accountable. Question 3. Knowing what I know now, what decision would serve me better going forward? These 3 questions replace the blame cycle with a learning cycle. And a person who learns from every experience compounds their wisdom at a rate that others simply cannot match. Here is my honest opinion on why so many people resist ownership. Ownership requires courage. Blame requires nothing. Blame is the easiest story in the world to tell because it makes you the victim of circumstances rather than the author of outcomes. And the world will often validate that story. People around you will nod sympathetically when you explain why things went wrong and why it was not your fault. That validation feels good in the moment. It provides temporary emotional relief, but it extracts a long-term price that most people do not calculate until years later. The price is your agency. Every time you accept the victim's story, you give away a piece of your ability to act and to change. The people who live with the most genuine confidence are not the ones who have never failed. They are the ones who have failed and owned it completely. There is a specific kind of confidence that can only be earned through that process. It is the confidence that comes from knowing you can face an outcome honestly, learn from it, and make better decisions going forward. That confidence does not disappear when circumstances get hard. It actually strengthens under pressure because it is not built on things going well. It is built on the proven ability to respond well regardless of what happens. Start practicing ownership today in the smallest possible context. When your morning does not go as planned, resist the urge to blame your alarm, your schedule, or the people around you. Ask yourself what you could have controlled and did not. When a conversation at work goes sideways, before you analyze what the other person did wrong, ask yourself how you contributed to the dynamic. When your energy feels low and your motivation is absent, before you blame your environment or your circumstances, look at your sleep, your nutrition, your daily choices, and ask what decisions led to this feeling. These small acts of honest self-examination are the training ground for a life built on ownership. And a life built on ownership is a life that keeps moving forward, regardless of what the world throws at it. Number 4, learn the skills life requires from you. Now, life has a very specific and honest way of showing you what you are missing. It is not subtle about it either. When you cannot manage your money, your bank account tells you clearly. When you cannot communicate effectively, your relationships show you the evidence in real time. When you lack the technical skills your career demands, your income reflects it back to you every single month. Life does not send politely worded letters explaining where you are falling short. It simply produces results that match your current level of skill. And if you do not like the results you are seeing, there is only one intelligent response. You identify what you are missing and you go learn it right now. Not someday, not when things calm down, not when you feel ready. Now, the word now matters more than most people realize. There is a very specific kind of procrastination that disguises itself as patience. A person tells themselves they will learn that skill when the time is right. They will take that course when they have more money. They will develop that ability when life gets less busy. And life, being what it is, never gets less busy. It just changes its demands. The skill you needed last year is still needed this year, and now there are new skills required on top of it. Every year you delay learning what life is asking of you. The gap between where you are and where you want to be quietly widens. And a widening gap is not just a professional problem. It is an emotional one. It produces a chronic low-level feeling of being behind, of being unqualified for the life you actually want to live. I want to talk about something that cuts to the heart of why people avoid learning new skills, even when they know they need them. The answer is discomfort. Learning feels threatening to the ego. When you are a beginner at something, you feel exposed. You feel incompetent. You feel like everyone around you can see that you do not know what you are doing. And for many adults who have spent years building an identity around what they already know, that feeling of beginner incompetence is almost unbearable. So they avoid it. They stay inside the comfortable borders of their existing knowledge, and then wonder why their results stay exactly the same year after year. The discomfort of learning is not a warning sign telling you to stop. It is a signal telling you that growth is actually happening. Here is something that behavioral research confirms clearly. Adults learn most effectively when they connect new skills to real and immediate problems they are trying to solve. This is fundamentally different from how most people think about education. Most people imagine learning as something that happens in a classroom, separate from real life, stored away for possible future use. But the most effective learning happens in the context of necessity. When you need to know something right now in order to solve a real problem you are facing, your brain engages at a completely different level. Information sticks faster, understanding deepens quicker. Application happens almost automatically because the knowledge has an immediate and meaningful home to go to inside your mind. This means that the best time to learn a skill is not when conditions are perfect. The best time to learn a skill is when life is demanding it from you. When you are struggling financially and feel the pressure of it every morning. That is the ideal time to learn about budgeting, about income generation, about financial literacy. When a relationship is breaking down and you feel the pain of poor communication, that is the exact moment your brain is most ready to absorb lessons about how people think, how emotions work, and how to express yourself clearly. Pain is not just suffering. Pain is also a learning accelerator when you choose to use it that way, instead of simply running from it. Let me be direct about something that I think needs to be said without softening. A large number of people are walking through life significantly underskilled for the life they say they want. They want financial freedom, but they have never studied how money actually works. They want deep and meaningful relationships, but they have never invested a single hour in understanding human psychology or communication. They want to build a business, but they have never learned the basics of marketing, sales, or financial management. They want better health, but they have never seriously studied nutrition or the science of sustainable habit formation. There is a real and measurable distance between the skills they currently have and the skills the life they want actually requires. And most of them are waiting for someone to bridge that gap for them. Nobody is coming to teach you what you need to know at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way. That is simply not how life operates. The information exists. It is more accessible today than at any other point in human history. Books, courses, mentors, videos, communities of practice. All of it is available right now at a fraction of the cost it would have required 20 years ago. The barrier to learning today is not access. The barrier is decision. The decision to sit down to be a beginner, to invest hours into developing a capability that does not yet exist inside you. That decision is the only thing standing between who you are today and who you need to become. I have a strong personal belief about skill development that I want to share directly. The most valuable skills a person can develop are not the ones that look impressive on a resume. They are the skills that make you genuinely capable in the real conditions of life. The ability to think clearly under pressure. The ability to learn something new quickly and apply it immediately. The ability to manage your own emotional state when everything around you is uncertain. The ability to communicate in a way that creates understanding rather than conflict. The ability to manage resources wisely when they are limited. These skills do not announce themselves loudly, but the people who possess them navigate life with a competence that others can feel, even if they cannot name it. There is a concept worth understanding deeply here. It is called skill stacking. The idea is straightforward. No single skill makes a person exceptional, but a combination of complementary skills, each developed to a solid working level, creates a profile that is genuinely rare and genuinely valuable. A person who understands basic finance, communicates clearly, manages their time effectively, and can solve problems independently is more capable than a person who has mastered one single skill in isolation. Life does not reward specialists who are useless outside their specialty. Life rewards people who have developed a broad enough base of real-world capability to handle what each day brings. Identify right now, not after this video. Right now in this moment, one skill that your life is actively requiring from you. Not a skill you are vaguely curious about. Not a skill that would be nice to have someday. A skill that your current struggles are specifically pointing to. If you are struggling with money, your life is requiring financial literacy from you. If you are struggling in your career, your life is requiring either a technical upgrade or a communication improvement. If you are struggling with your health, your life is requiring the practical knowledge of how to build and maintain sustainable physical habits. Once you identify that skill, your next job is simple. Find one resource today, one book, one course, one person who knows what you need to learn. Commit to engaging with that resource consistently until the skill is no longer missing from your life. Progress in skill development is not always visible in the early stages, and this is where most people quit. They spend 3 weeks learning something, see no dramatic external results, and conclude that the learning is not working. This is one of the most expensive mistakes a person can make. Skill development follows a curve that feels flat at the beginning, and then rises sharply once a threshold of competence is crossed. The people who push through the flat part of that curve are the ones who eventually experience the sharp rise. The people who quit during the flat part never find out how close they were to the breakthrough. Patience in skill development is not passive waiting. It is active, consistent practice while trusting that the progress is happening below the surface, before it becomes visible above it. Your life right now is a direct report card of your current skill level, not your potential, not your intelligence. Your current skills applied to your current circumstances. The good news embedded in that truth is enormous, because skills can always be learned. Potential is abstract and hard to measure, but a specific skill is concrete, learnable, and within your reach if you are willing to put in the deliberate effort. Every skill you develop changes the quality of decision you can make, the quality of problem you can solve, and ultimately, the quality of life you are able to build entirely on your own terms. Number 5, start before you feel ready or fully prepared. Readiness is one of the greatest lies the human mind has ever invented. People spend years, sometimes entire decades, waiting to feel ready before they take the first step toward something meaningful. They wait to feel confident before they start the business. They wait to feel motivated before they begin working on their health. They wait to feel certain before they have the important conversation. And while they wait for that feeling of readiness to arrive, life keeps moving at full speed without them. The painful truth is that readiness is not a feeling that appears before action. Readiness is a feeling that develops because of action. You do not get ready and then start. You start and then you get ready through the experience of doing. I want you to think about the first time you did anything significant in your life. The first time you drove a car, the first time you spoke in front of people, the first time you started a new job in an unfamiliar environment. Were you ready for any of those things in the way you imagined being ready? Almost certainly not. You were nervous. Your hands may have been unsteady. Your thoughts were not organized. Your confidence was thin. But you did it anyway, because the situation required it. And something happened on the other side of that imperfect beginning. You learned, you adjusted, you improved. The doing itself produced the readiness that waiting never could. Every person who has accomplished anything meaningful has that same story at the root of their beginning. Here is where I want to add something that most people overlook when they talk about starting before you are ready. There are two distinct types of unreadiness, and they are not the same thing. The first type is practical unreadiness, which means you genuinely lack the basic information or resources to take even a first step. This type is real, and it sometimes does require a short period of preparation before action. The second type is emotional unreadiness, which means you have enough to begin, but your fear, your self-doubt, and your need for certainty are convincing you that you are not ready. Most people who say they are not ready are experiencing the second type, not the first. They have enough. They know enough. They have sufficient resources. But fear has dressed itself up as preparation, and they cannot tell the difference. The psychological mechanism behind this is worth understanding clearly. The human brain is wired to avoid situations where failure is possible. This was useful thousands of years ago, when failure in certain situations could mean physical danger. But in the context of modern life and modern goals, the brain's risk avoidance system fires just as loudly for things that carry zero physical danger. Starting a new project, publishing your first piece of work, launching a business with limited funds, reaching out to someone important. All of these trigger the same internal alarm system as genuine danger. Your heart rate increases. Your thinking narrows. Your brain floods you with reasons why now is not the right time. And if you do not recognize this process for what it is, you'll obey it every single time and never move. Understanding that your brain treats uncertain action as a threat allows you to make a more informed choice. You can acknowledge the fear response without obeying it. You can notice the feeling of unreadiness, recognize it as a biological signal and not an objective fact, and then act anyway. This is not recklessness. This is courage in its most practical and everyday form. Courage is not the absence of hesitation. Courage is the decision to move forward while the hesitation is still present and loudly making its case. Every person who has built something real has made that decision repeatedly, sometimes daily, sometimes multiple times in a single day. Let me tell you what happens to a person who consistently waits until they feel ready. After a few years of waiting, they develop a deeply uncomfortable relationship with their own potential. They can see clearly what they want to achieve. They understand intellectually what steps are required, but there is a growing gap between that vision and their actual behavior. That gap produces a specific kind of inner tension that is hard to describe, but very easy to feel. It sits in your chest during quiet moments. It shows up when you see someone else doing what you always said you would do. It surfaces as a low and persistent dissatisfaction that no amount of distraction fully removes. That tension is not weakness. It is your unlived potential pressing against the wall of your hesitation. My strong opinion on this, formed through years of observation, is that waiting for readiness is one of the most socially acceptable forms of self-sabotage that exists. Nobody questions it. In fact, people often praise it. They say things like, "You are being responsible," or "You are being smart by waiting until conditions improve." But what looks like responsibility from the outside is often avoidance operating under a respectable name. Real responsibility is not waiting until everything is perfect. Real responsibility is moving forward with what you have, learning as you go, and adjusting based on real feedback from real experience, rather than imagined feedback from scenarios that exist only in your head. There is a concept in the world of action and performance called minimum viable effort, and it applies powerfully here. You do not need to take a perfect first step. The difference between those two things is enormous. A perfect first step is one that you imagine taking after months of preparation, after you have read every relevant book, after you have spoken to every relevant person, after every condition aligns in your favor. A real first step is the one you can take today with what you currently have available. It might be imperfect. It might produce an outcome that requires significant adjustment. But it is real. And real beats perfect every single time because real actually happens. Consider for a moment what a person learns from taking an imperfect first step that they could never learn from continued preparation. They learn how the real environment responds to their effort. They learn where their actual gaps are, not the gaps they imagine, but the real ones. They learn how they personally handle the pressure of being in motion rather than standing still. They discover resources, connections, and insights that are only visible from inside the experience of doing. None of this information is available during the preparation phase. It only exists inside the action itself. This is why people who start imperfectly and adjust consistently outperform people who prepare endlessly and never begin. Here is a framework I want to give you that is practical and immediately applicable. When you find yourself waiting to feel ready, run through these 3 checks. Check 1. Do I have enough information to take one single step forward today, even a small one? Not all the steps, just one. Check 2. Is my hesitation based on a real practical gap, or is it based on fear of an outcome I cannot actually predict? Be honest about this, because your brain will dress fear up as practicality very convincingly. Check 3. What is the actual cost of waiting one more week compared to the potential cost of starting imperfectly today? When you run this honest calculation, the math almost always favors starting. The cost of an imperfect beginning is almost always lower than the accumulated cost of continued delay. Time is the one resource that does not replenish. Money lost can be recovered. Relationships strained can be repaired. Mistakes made can be corrected. But time spent waiting is gone completely and permanently. Every week you spend waiting to feel ready is a week that will never come back. This is not meant to create panic. It is meant to create urgency, healthy, honest, productive urgency. The kind that wakes you up in the morning with a sense of purpose, rather than putting you to sleep at night with regret. When you truly understand that time is finite and irreplaceable, waiting for perfect conditions stops feeling responsible and starts feeling like the costly choice it actually is. The people who changed their lives, who built businesses from nothing, who transformed their health after years of neglect, who repaired relationships everyone else wrote off, did not do it because they found the perfect moment. They did it because they stopped waiting for the perfect moment and created a real moment out of what was available to them right then. Their beginning was messy. Their first attempt was imperfect. Their early results were modest, and motion, even imperfect motion, generates feedback, builds momentum, develops skill, and creates the conditions for progress that standing still could never produce. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is not bridged by better preparation. It is bridged by consistent, imperfect, courageous forward movement, starting from exactly where you stand today. Number 6, push through hard moments without asking for permission. Nobody is going to give you a signal that it is okay to keep going. Nobody is going to stand beside you during the hardest stretch of your journey and tell you that you are strong enough to make it through. Nobody is going to validate your pain and then hand you a green light to continue. The world does not operate that way. Hard moments arrive without warning, without an instruction manual, and without a support team assembled and ready to carry you forward. They arrive when you are already tired. They arrive when your resources feel thin. They arrive when your confidence is at its lowest and your doubt is at its loudest. And in those exact moments, the only question that matters is whether you are going to move forward on your own authority or stand still waiting for someone to tell you that it is acceptable to try. The concept of permission is something I want to examine carefully because most people do not realize how deeply they have been conditioned to seek it. From the earliest years of life, you were taught to ask before acting, ask before you speak, ask before you leave, ask before you try something new. This conditioning served a purpose when you were young and genuinely needed guidance from people with more experience and judgment. But many adults carry that same permission-seeking behavior into their independent lives long after the need for it has expired. They look for approval before making a business decision. They wait for encouragement before they push past a difficult obstacle. They measure their right to continue by how much external support is available. And when that support is absent, which it often is during the hardest moments, they interpret the silence as a sign to stop. Let me be honest about what asking for permission in hard moments actually does to you internally. Every time you pause your progress to seek someone else's validation before continuing, you communicate something damaging to your own sense of self. You tell yourself that your judgment alone is not sufficient. You tell yourself that your strength requires external certification to be considered real. Over time, this creates a person who cannot trust their own inner signals. They feel strong, but immediately question whether the strength is enough. They feel ready, but immediately look around to confirm that others agree. This dependency on external validation does not just slow your progress. It fundamentally undermines your ability to act independently in the moments when independent action is the only option available. Hard moments are not random interruptions in an otherwise smooth life. They are predictable and necessary features of any path worth traveling. Every meaningful goal produces hard moments at specific and reliable intervals. The beginning is hard because everything is unfamiliar. The middle is hard because progress has slowed and the end is not yet visible. The late stage is hard because the accumulated weight of sustained effort creates fatigue that tests your commitment in ways that the beginning never could. Knowing this in advance changes how you experience these moments when they arrive. Instead of interpreting a hard moment as evidence that something has gone wrong, you begin to interpret it as confirmation that you are exactly where the path requires you to be. The hard moment is not a detour. It is the road itself. Research on human resilience consistently points to one core differentiator between people who push through adversity and people who stop. That differentiator is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not even prior experience with difficult situations. The core differentiator is the internal narrative a person tells themselves in the moment of difficulty. People who push through hard moments consistently tell themselves a narrative of continuation. They say things internally like, "This is hard, and I am still capable of moving forward." People who stop consistently tell themselves a narrative of limitation. They say things like, "This is too hard, and I need more support before I can continue." Both groups are experiencing the same external difficulty. The difference lives entirely in the story being told inside the mind during those critical seconds of decision. Here is something I find deeply important and rarely discussed. The act of pushing through a hard moment without external support does something to your brain chemistry that is genuinely physical. When you persist through difficulty and come out the other side, Your brain releases a specific combination of neurochemicals that reinforce the behavior. It registers the experience as a success and updates its prediction of what you are capable of. This is not just emotional satisfaction. It is a biological update to your self-model each time you push through without asking permission. Your brain becomes slightly more confident in your ability to handle difficulty. The threshold of what feels manageable quietly rises. Things that once felt overwhelming begin to feel like normal operational challenges. This is the physical mechanism behind what people call mental toughness. I want to address something that people often confuse with pushing through hard moments. There is a real difference between pushing through difficulty and ignoring genuine warning signs that require a change of direction. Pushing through means continuing toward your goal despite the discomfort, the doubt, the fatigue, and the absence of external encouragement. It does not mean ignoring clear factual evidence that your current approach is fundamentally flawed and needs adjustment. The distinction is important because some people use the idea of persistence as justification for continuing a strategy that genuine evidence has already proven ineffective. Pushing through hard moments means you do not let emotion alone stop you. It does not mean you refuse to update your approach when real information tells you that an adjustment is needed. The people in your life who discourage you during hard moments are often not doing so out of malice. They are doing so out of their own fear and their own limited experience with what is possible. When someone tells you that your goal is too ambitious, they are not delivering objective truth. They are projecting the ceiling of their own belief onto the floor of your potential. When someone suggests you take the easier path during a particularly difficult stretch, they are measuring your situation using their own tolerance for discomfort as the standard. Other people's opinions about your hard moments are filtered through their own experiences and limitations. They are useful data points in some contexts, but they should never be the deciding factor in whether you continue or stop. My personal conviction on this is strong, and it is based on years of watching people succeed and fail. The moments when pushing through feels most impossible are almost always the moments when breakthroughs are closest. This is not wishful thinking. It is a pattern that reveals itself consistently across different domains and different people. The final stretch of any difficult endeavor concentrates the most resistance, because that is where the gap between where you are and where you want to be is smallest and the stakes feel highest. Stopping in that final stretch because you could not find permission to continue is one of the most costly decisions a person can make. Not because the goal is lost forever, but because you walk away without the evidence that you could have made it, and that missing evidence affects every future attempt you make. Here is a practical approach for the next time a hard moment arrives, and you feel the pull to look for someone to tell you it is okay to keep going. First, name what you are feeling specifically. Not a general statement like this is hard, but a specific identification, like I am exhausted, and I am doubting whether my effort is producing any results. Naming the feeling precisely reduces its power over your behavior. Second, ask yourself one direct question. Is there anything stopping me from taking one more action right now, other than how I feel in this moment? In most cases, the honest answer is no. The obstacle is emotional, not physical. Third, take one small action immediately without waiting for the feeling to improve. That action breaks the paralysis and generates forward momentum from inside the difficulty, rather than waiting for easier conditions before moving. Permission is a concept that belongs in childhood. It served you then because you needed structure and guidance from people who had more context than you did. But you are not in that position anymore. You are an adult with your own judgment, your own experience, your own reasons for pursuing what matters to you, and your own capacity to assess whether continuing makes sense. Nobody else has lived your life from the inside. Nobody else understands the full weight of your journey, the specific shape of your goals, and the particular reasons why pushing through matters for you. which means nobody else is qualified to grant you permission to continue. That authority belongs to you and only you. The moment you internalize that fact completely, hard moments lose their power to stop you because you stop looking outward for something that was always yours to give yourself. When the next hard moment arrives, and it will arrive because that is the nature of any life lived with genuine ambition, do not reach for your phone to vent. Do not look for a sign that things will improve. Do not wait for someone to notice how hard you are working and offer encouragement. Instead, plant your feet, take a breath, and make the decision from the inside. The decision that says I am continuing not because someone gave me permission, but because I know what this matters to me, and I am the only person qualified to determine whether I give up or keep going. That decision, made repeatedly in the hardest moments of your life, becomes the foundation of a character that nothing external can easily break. Number 7, trust your ability to figure things out alone. There is a specific kind of fear that very few people talk about openly. It is not the fear of failing. It is not the fear of being judged. It is the fear of being left alone with a problem and having nothing inside you that is capable of solving it. This fear lives quietly in the background of millions of people's lives. It is the reason they constantly seek second opinions before making basic decisions. It is the reason they feel paralyzed the moment a familiar support system is removed. It is the reason they spend hours asking everyone around them what to do instead of spending 30 focused minutes thinking through the problem themselves. The fear of being alone with a challenge and coming up short is one of the most limiting fears a human being can carry. And the only way to dismantle it is to repeatedly prove to yourself that you are more capable than that fear gives you credit for. Self-trust is not arrogance. I want to make that distinction absolutely clear before we go any further. Arrogance is the belief that you are better than others and therefore do not need input or information from anyone. Self-trust is something entirely different. Self-trust is the quiet and evidence-based confidence that when a problem appears, you have the mental capacity, the resourcefulness, and the persistence to work through it and arrive at a workable solution. Self-trust does not mean you know everything. It means you trust your ability to find what you do not know and use it effectively. Those are two completely different operating systems, and the person running on self-trust navigates life with a fundamentally different experience than the person running on constant external dependence. Think about how self-trust actually develops in a person over time. It does not develop through being told that you are capable. It does not come from reading about confidence or listening to motivational content. Self-trust develops through a very specific and irreplaceable process. You face a situation where you do not know the answer. You sit with the discomfort of not knowing. You think, you search, you try, you adjust, and eventually you produce a result. That result, even if it is imperfect, deposits a unit of evidence into your internal account of self-belief. The next time a similar situation appears, your brain recalls that deposit and approaches the new challenge with slightly more confidence. This cycle, repeated hundreds of times across different types of challenges, builds the kind of deep self-trust that does not collapse under pressure. Here is what I observe in people who lack self-trust, and it is both revealing and saddening. They are not unintelligent. They are not unskilled. Many of them are extraordinarily capable in very specific areas of their life. But the moment they step outside their familiar territory, the moment a problem appears that does not fit neatly into what they already know, they freeze. And then they immediately start looking outward. They text someone, they post in a group, they call a friend. They search desperately for someone who has already solved this exact problem, so they can simply copy the solution without going through the process of figuring it out themselves. This habit feels efficient. It feels practical. But it is actually one of the most expensive habits a person can maintain because it systematically prevents them from ever building the capacity to handle new challenges independently. The science of cognitive development gives us a useful concept here called productive struggle. Research in learning and performance consistently shows that when people work through a difficult problem without immediately accessing external help, they develop deeper understanding, stronger retention, and greater transferable skill, than people who access help at the first sign of difficulty. The struggle itself, the friction of not immediately knowing, is not an obstacle to learning. It is the mechanism through which real learning happens. When you sit with a hard problem and push your brain to work through it, you are not just solving that specific problem. You are expanding the overall capacity of your mind to handle difficulty. Every time you outsource that struggle, you forfeit that expansion. I want to share something about the emotional texture of learning to trust yourself that I think is important and honest. In the early stages of building self-trust, the experience is uncomfortable in a way that is easy to misread as failure. You sit with a problem and you feel uncertain. Your thoughts are not organized. Your first few attempts at a solution might not work. There is a raw and exposed feeling that comes with being genuinely unsure and choosing to work through it anyway. Most people interpret that feeling as evidence that they are not capable. They say to themselves that if they were truly capable, they would not feel this lost. But that interpretation is completely wrong. That feeling is not the feeling of incapability. That feeling is the feeling of real thinking happening in real time. Capable people feel uncertain too. They just do not let the uncertainty make the decision for them. My honest opinion on why self-trust is so rare in the modern world is connected to how easily accessible external input has become. Decades ago, if you had a problem, you had limited options. You could think it through yourself, consult one or two people nearby, or go to a library and research. All of those options required significant personal effort and time before external input was available. Today, an answer of some kind is available within seconds. And while this access is genuinely valuable in many situations, it has produced an unintended side effect. People have stopped tolerating the discomfort of not immediately knowing. They have lost the habit of sitting with a problem long enough for their own mind to engage with it seriously. The result is a generation of people with access to unlimited information and a shrinking capacity to think independently. Figuring things out alone does not mean isolation. It does not mean refusing to learn from others or declining to use available resources. It means developing the practice of genuinely engaging your own mind first before reaching outward. It means giving yourself the first 30 minutes, the first hour, the first serious attempt before deciding that external input is necessary. In that window of independent engagement, something valuable happens. You discover what you actually know. You identify where your genuine gaps are rather than where you imagine them to be. You develop a specific and informed question rather than a vague and general one. When you eventually do seek input, the quality of that interaction is dramatically higher because you come to it prepared rather than helpless. Here is a practical structure for building the habit of figuring things out alone. When a new problem arrives, give yourself a defined period of independent engagement before seeking help. 30 minutes is a good starting point for most situations. During that time, write down everything you already know about the problem. Write down every possible approach you can think of without filtering for quality yet. Then identify the single biggest unknown that is blocking your progress. Only after completing these 3 steps should you decide whether external input is genuinely needed or whether you already have enough to move forward on your own. You will be surprised how often the answer is that you already have enough. Most people never discover this because they reach outward before giving their own mind a real chance to engage. Trust in your own ability is not built on the belief that you will always get it right. That would not be trust. That would be delusion. Real self-trust is built on the belief that even when you get it wrong, you have the capacity to assess what happened, learn from the experience, and adjust your approach. This is a fundamentally different relationship with failure than most people have. Most people treat failure as evidence that they were not capable enough to handle the challenge. People with genuine self-trust treat failure as information that their current approach needs refinement. One of these interpretations produces retreat. The other produces iteration. Iteration, repeated enough times, produces mastery. And mastery in any meaningful area of life is built entirely on the foundation of a person who trusted themselves enough to keep trying when the early results were imperfect. The people you look up to, the ones who seem to handle complexity with a calm that you find almost impossible to explain, built that calm through a long and often quiet history of figuring things out alone. They were not born with that composure. They developed it through years of sitting with hard problems, working through the discomfort of uncertainty, producing imperfect solutions, refining those solutions, and gradually accumulating a body of evidence that told them clearly that they could handle what life brought. That evidence is available to you through the same process. It cannot be borrowed from someone else. It cannot be absorbed by watching others. It can only be built through your own repeated experience of engaging with difficulty and coming out the other side having worked through it on your own terms. Begin today with the smallest possible version of this practice. Find one thing in your life right now that you have been waiting for someone else to help you figure out. One decision you have been postponing until you get more outside input. One problem you have been sitting on because it feels too complex to tackle without guidance. Take that one thing and commit to spending real focused time with it today before you ask anyone. Anything, engage your own mind fully and honestly write down what you know. Think through what you do not know. Try something. The result is almost secondary to the act itself, because the act of genuinely trying to figure something out alone is where the trust begins to build. And once that trust starts growing inside you, the entire experience of being a person in a complicated world begins to feel fundamentally different. Number 8, use your struggles to grow stronger every day. Most people treat their struggles like a disease they need to cure as quickly as possible. They feel the discomfort of a financial setback and immediately search for the fastest exit. They experience the weight of a failing relationship and look for the quickest resolution to stop the pain. They face a professional failure and spend their energy trying to erase it from their memory rather than extracting anything useful from it. This instinct to escape struggle as fast as possible is deeply human and completely understandable. Pain is unpleasant. Difficulty is exhausting. Nobody chooses struggle for the pleasure of it. But the people who treat every struggle as something to simply survive and discard are missing the most valuable thing that struggle produces. They are missing the growth that lives inside the difficulty and is only accessible to the person who chooses to engage with it rather than simply endure it. I want to make a distinction that is critical to everything in this conversation. There is a fundamental difference between going through a struggle and growing through a struggle. Going through a struggle means you experience the difficulty. You manage to get to the other side of it, and then you continue your life largely unchanged by what happened. You survived it, but you did not extract anything from it. Growing through a struggle means you engage with the difficulty consciously. You ask what it is showing you. You examine where it is exposing a gap in your skills, your thinking, your habits, or your character. You take the raw and uncomfortable experience and deliberately convert it into something that makes you more capable than you were before the struggle arrived. These two responses to the same struggle produce completely different human beings over the course of a lifetime. Here is something that the science of human development confirms clearly and powerfully. The brain does not grow through comfort. Comfort is pleasant and necessary for recovery, but it does not produce cognitive or emotional growth on its own. Growth happens through exposure to challenges that slightly exceed your current capacity. When you face a situation that pushes you beyond what you currently know how to handle, your brain is forced to build new connections, develop new strategies, and access capabilities that were dormant during easier periods. This is not just motivational language. This is the actual neurological mechanism behind human growth and development. Struggle is not the enemy of your progress. Struggle, engaged with consciously and deliberately, is the primary engine of your progress. Think about the strongest people you know personally. Not the loudest, not the most impressive on the surface. The genuinely strong ones. The ones who remain steady when everything around them is uncertain. The ones who recover from setbacks without falling apart. The ones who carry a depth of character that you can feel when you are in their presence. Now consider what produced that strength. It was not a comfortable life. It was not a path free of difficulty and loss. In every case, the strength you admire in those people was forged through seasons of real struggle that they chose to engage with honestly rather than simply flee from. Their strength is the accumulated result of countless moments where they could have crumbled and chose instead to continue. You are looking at the finished product without seeing the process that built it. My opinion on this is direct, and I hold it firmly. The biggest waste in any human life is not wasted money or wasted opportunity. The biggest waste is a struggle that was endured without producing any growth. When you go through a genuinely hard experience and come out the other side, having learned nothing, changed nothing, and developed nothing, you have paid the full price of that struggle without collecting any of its value. And every struggle has value available inside it. Financial hardship teaches you things about resourcefulness and priority that prosperity never could. Relationship difficulty teaches you things about communication and emotional intelligence that smooth interactions never require. Professional failure teaches you things about your own judgment and adaptability that consistent success never demands. The value is always there. The question is whether you are going to collect it or leave it behind. There's a specific practice I want to introduce here because understanding this concept intellectually is not enough. The practice is called deliberate extraction, and it works like this. After any significant struggle or setback, before you move on, you sit down and you write out the answers to 4 specific questions. Question 1. What did this struggle reveal about a gap in my current skills or knowledge? Question 2. What did this struggle reveal about a habit or pattern in my behavior that is not serving me? Question 3. What did I do during this struggle that actually worked and that I should do more of? Question 4. What specific change will I make going forward because of what this experience taught me? These 4 questions transform a passive experience of difficulty into an active source of personal development. They force your brain to process the struggle as information rather than simply as pain. What makes this practice powerful is not just the insights it produces. It is the habit of mind it develops over time. When you consistently extract learning from difficulty, your relationship with struggle begins to change at a fundamental level. You stop dreading hard experiences as purely negative events. You begin to approach them with a different kind of attention. Not with excitement for the pain itself, but with a readiness to engage with what the experience is going to produce in you. This shift in orientation changes everything about how you move through difficult periods. Instead of spending your emotional energy wishing the struggle would end faster, you spend part of that energy staying present with what the struggle is teaching you. And that presence accelerates both your growth and, interestingly, your ability to navigate out of the difficulty more effectively. There is a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth, and it is one of the most important and underreported findings in the science of human resilience. Research shows that a significant percentage of people who go through severe hardship, loss, and genuine trauma report measurable growth in specific areas of their life. Following the experience, they report greater personal strength, deeper relationships, expanded perspective on what matters, and a richer appreciation for life than they had before the difficult event. This growth does not happen to everyone who experiences hardship. It happens specifically to the people who engage with the experience rather than suppress it, who process it consciously rather than avoid it, who allow it to question their existing assumptions rather than protect those assumptions from examination. Post-traumatic growth is real, and it is available to anyone willing to engage with their struggles rather than simply endure them. The daily dimension of this is important because most people think of growth through struggle only in the context of major life events. They think about recovering from a serious loss or a significant failure. But the same principle applies to the small and daily friction that every life contains. the frustrating conversation you had this morning, the task that did not go as planned this afternoon, the decision you made that produced an outcome you did not want. Each of these small daily struggles contains a small unit of growth potential. When you consistently extract that growth from the small daily struggles, the accumulation over months and years is enormous. The person who grows a little every single day from the friction of ordinary life becomes dramatically more capable over a year than the person who only grows during major crisis moments. Let me address the emotional reality of this, because it deserves honest acknowledgement. Growing through struggle is not a painless process. Choosing to engage with difficulty rather than escape, it requires you to stay in contact with uncomfortable feelings for longer than avoidance would allow. There is a real emotional cost to that. The person who processes a failure honestly feels the weight of it more fully than the person who immediately distracts themselves. But the person who processes it honestly also comes out the other side, having genuinely moved through it rather than simply around it. Avoidance does not eliminate the emotional weight of a struggle. It defers it. The weight remains stored inside you until something forces it to surface, usually at the least convenient possible moment. Engagement is harder in the short term and dramatically healthier in the long term. Here is something I believe with complete certainty based on everything I have observed. The version of you that exists on the other side of a struggle you engaged with fully and honestly is a fundamentally better version than the one that entered it. Not better in a vague or general way, specifically better. More patient because you have practiced patience under real pressure. More resourceful because you have solved real problems with limited resources. More empathetic because you have experienced genuine difficulty and understand it from the inside. More confident because you have evidence of your own ability to survive and grow through hard things.